To create a base image for your ESXi instance in new future VMs, you'll first want to go ahead and remote into your server's dashboard, and you'll land in the host page, and you'll want to go into virtual machines. As you see here, I have a bunch of virtual machines that I've created and duplicated and whatnot, and I also do have my image here. But first, to create your initial image, you're going to want to go ahead and create a new virtual machine. Click Next. Here you're just going to want to type in your name, so base image. Next, you're going to want to choose your ESXi instance, your OS family, and also your OS version. So I will choose Windows 10 64-bit. Go to Next. You'll want to next choose your data store. I only have one. Next, we'll want to go ahead and choose our settings. So just to note, these can actually be changed with your future virtual machines as well. But basically, you'll want to give enough resources and whatnot, such as the CPU, hard disk, and memory. Enough resources so that you can actually boot up the computer, install your programs, configure your settings and whatnot. But go ahead and apply your CPU settings and also your RAM settings here. And one thing that I would note for creating virtual machines and other base images, especially if you're tight on storage, is do thin provisioned. Basically, this setting will only use how much data is actually used on the drive, rather than taking up a full 32 gigs to actually set aside for that drive. So if you're only using 5 gigs out of the 32, it'll only store it within the actual data store as 5 gigabytes rather than the full 32 gigabytes. Next, everything else looks good to me. Except here, data store ISO file. This is the file that you're going to want to use when you go to boot from your OS. I have a ISO folder within my actual data store, so I'm going to choose my OS. To do that, you can go ahead and go to your data store. What I would recommend is creating a folder specifically for your ISO files. What you can do here, create directory, and then once you want to go ahead and upload your actual ISO files that you downloaded to your local computer to your server, you're going to go ahead, select your ISO folder, click on upload, and then this is where you're going to actually go ahead and select your file, and then click open, and then it will close this, and then here at the bottom under recent tasks, it'll actually add it as a task to upload that ISO. And then that's when you can choose it. So let me get back to where we were real quick under create a new virtual machine. And we were under Windows 10 64-bit. Data store is the file I'm going to use, or the storage. And I'm just going to go ahead with the preset, and I'll choose my data ISO under ISO on Windows. And again, this is just my own made folder. This is not a pre-built folder through VMware. If all other settings looks correct, again, you can go ahead and edit any of these. You can also edit any of these in all your future virtual machines as well that you'll be used to make. So I'm going to go ahead, and I forgot a setting under the hard disk for thin provisioned. I'll go ahead and click finish. So once you are finished, you're going to want to go ahead and click on your virtual machine and power it on. Once it powers on, you're going to want to go ahead, if it doesn't automatically open up the display, make sure you go ahead and open that up. It's unsuccessful, and let's verify why. We go under edit settings. We should actually turn our virtual machine off because we can't make any changes while the virtual machine's on. So we want to go to edit settings. And let's see, we had network adapter, so we want to make sure that connect is on. So then that way it'll automatically connect to the ISO file. So let's go ahead and power that back on. and we want to go ahead and push spacebar, and as you can see now we got the Windows logo. So this is the expected result when you first turn it on. So make sure that the connect box is checked when you go ahead and upload the ISO file. And we'll go ahead and pause here till we get the launch. Alright, so now we have the typical Windows OS launcher, so we'll just go ahead and go through the typical prompts. I don't have a product key. I would recommend to use that setting just for the image, so then that way if you have special keys that you have to use, or if you have one key, use it for this and then you could duplicate it. I believe it should use that one key. If not, it may go ahead and go out of date or expire since it's already been used. So you want to go ahead with custom Windows install. You want to make sure that this is the drive that you're going to be using. So next, there shouldn't be anything already pre-installed on this computer since it's blank. And Windows is just setting up at this point and installing. So at this point, our virtual machine is going to restart since Windows is completely installed. And our virtual machine is rebooting. Typically the ISO file won't reboot automatically, but if it does so, we can go ahead and stop where we're at, shut the virtual machine down, go ahead back into settings, under the actions menu here, edit settings. You'll need to turn off the virtual machine if it does auto boot back into the initial setup, and you'll want to uncheck the connect button. And then once you do that, you'll hit save, and then you'll go ahead and reboot the virtual machine, and then it won't boot into the initial launching screen. And Windows is getting ready. Per usual, it does take a while. Windows is one of the more slower operating systems that it takes for initial boot, but nevertheless, it will work. Alright, so now we need to continue the setup with saying yes to United States, or you need to select your other country. If that's the option, we'll choose yes, and we will skip this part. It is now moving on to the network stage. It should be continuing to auto configuration since this is a wired connection. If you're using Wi-Fi, it may prompt you to put in the credentials to connect to the Wi-Fi. For this instance, I'll use setup for personal use and choose next. I will choose offline account because I do not want to connect a Office account with a base image. And this will be the user account that you will be prompted to sign into every time the computer boots. So for this example, I'm just going to put admin. We'll choose next. For this one, you may want to enter in a password. If not, just go ahead and click on next. And also note, if you're choosing to edit settings and you don't have a password, some settings you won't actually be able to go ahead and configure without that password. Next, these are the privacy settings for your device. So just my preference, I turn them all off. but you can go ahead and leave them as so or adjust them to your liking. Next, this is a customized experience. I'm just going to hit skip since this is a base image. And let Cortana get things done. I'm going to hit not now because I do not care to use Cortana with this instance. And now our initial setup should be over, and this should be prompting us with the user end desktop. Alright, and our initial base image has been created. So at this point you can go ahead and start to configure everything that you would like for this image to have, all the settings that need to be adjusted and whatnot. One website that I find particularly useful is a website called Ninite. I'm not sponsored by them, but if I open up the web browser here and start without your data, it'll prompt you to sign into your account and everything like that, just as the normal user computer. So I believe it's ninite.com. So Ninite is a website that basically has a bunch of different software that you can click, and once you are all through clicking, you can go ahead and click on Get Your Ninite, and basically it will pre-install all these applications here, and it makes it just a little bit easier, a little bit time saver, rather than installing each one individually. But with that, you'll want to make your overall configurations. So let's say I don't want this on the taskbar, I don't want the Windows Store, I don't want the weather showing up on the actual taskbar either. And some features you won't be able to do, like the weather, without actually activating your Windows. So that's where adding in that activation key will come into part. So once you are done editing your overall image, you're going to want to go ahead, right click the start button, shut down and sign out, and you're going to want to shut down. And we're shutting down the image, and we will wait, and the viewer should automatically close. If not, we can close it ourselves. I'm just going to go ahead and close it. At this point it should be off. If I go ahead and refresh, yep, it is off. Alright, so now that we have our base image, we basically want to create our new computer. So what we want to do first is basically go into our data store, and this is where you're going to want to create your folder for your computer. So for this instance, I created a LHT PC computer folder, and I also created the base image folder. So every computer within your ESXi instance is basically going to have its own directory folder within your data store. So in this case, I already have an image that I typically use for computers, but I'm actually going to delete this. And with that, and also delete the VMDK file. So I'm going to actually copy over the files that are needed to actually register a VM. So to do so, you should need two files, which should be your VMDK file, which is your hard drive that we made. So we'll go ahead and hit copy. Then you'll choose your designated folder. So in my case, it's the LHT PC folder. We'll hit copy. And you can see that's actually transferring the data now. And I'm on the edge of believing that you need the VMX file, but I'm not 100% sure, because I think when you register the actual drive, it should... Okay, so you do need it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and copy this as well to our LHT PC. So just to make sure, you do need to copy the VMX and VMDK files to the actual folder that you're going to be making a imaged computer of now. So we'll go ahead and wait for this data to finish transferring and continue. Alrighty, so we just got notification that the image drive has been completed, and we can go ahead and go to Data Store Browser. We can go to LHTPC, and we can also right click on our VMX file, and we can click on Register VM. So at this point, it should have made a virtual machine, and we have it here under base image, and we can see the differences here between 10 gigs and 264 KB, which means that this one probably hasn't turned on before. So what we can actually do, what is ISO? Yep, storage 264 KB. We can actually go in here and go under edit settings, and this should be our non-booted virtual machine. And again, we can tell that because of the actual storage file of only being 264 KB, so it's actually never booted. As you can see here within the virtual machines menu, you can see that this one's rated at 10 gigabytes, so this one's actually been booted, everything like that. Once you actually boot this second image here, or your designated computer, it'll actually go ahead and expand that drive to the whatever it needs, basically. So we're going to leave these typical system settings alone. I'm going to go ahead and change the VM options to LHTPC. We're going to hit save. So that should be it for this part. Again, if you want to go ahead and edit other settings such as RAM, CPU, hard drive, the network connection, CD drive, anything like that, video card settings, you can go ahead and do so here. I'm actually going to add some more CPU just so it's fine when it boots, and you can change the RAM from megabytes to gigabytes. I like to work in gigabytes. It's a little bit easier, especially for the beginners. And hard disk, it's also thin provisioned since it was automatically copied and everything like that. And we can see the actual disk file here. So this is where it was copied from, base image VMDK. And we'll go ahead and save. And now that we have this remade one, you can also see within the virtual machines menu that we have two now, so we can go ahead, select it, and power on. And once we do so, the actual drive size should increase. So you can see there it's already up to 8.1 gigabytes. And alright, our computer is signing into itself right now under the admin profile that we pre-created within our base image. And just to confirm the settings, we'll go ahead and look for our configured settings within the base image that we applied, such as removing the mail and store applications from the taskbar. So with that tutorial, this is essentially the conclusion. From this point on, this computer can be not this computer, but the image files can be duplicated to multiple folders and whatnot, and be used to create multiple virtual machines that can be easily spun up within minutes rather than an hour or so, or even longer. Also with all the pre-configured applications and settings, stuff like that, which can be a huge time saver. This is a huge thing to know, especially in an organization where you may have to set up multiple computers, but in that sense you may have vSphere, which can also be used in vCenter to actually duplicate specific VMs that are on ESXi servers. But if you're using this as a home instance with just ESXi, you can go ahead and duplicate the computers as I showed. There is also another way where you can do a vSphere instance within ESXi, but the license does cost about $500, I believe, for a year, which I do not particularly want to pay for. So just with using this simple workaround trick, you can easily duplicate your virtual machines and make it a lot quicker to go ahead and make new instances of computers and whatnot. So that's it. That'll conclude this tutorial, and please let me know within the comments if this was helpful, if there's other questions or other tutorials that could be made off of this, and have a good one.